She just unfortunately found herself pregnant, and she never told Paul, my biological dad. She says she never told anyone, and I tend to believe her.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 155, and I am getting very excited for the Untangling Our Roots Summit, which will be coming up at the end of March 2023. It will be held in Louisville, Kentucky, and it will be the first ever summit for NPEs, adoptees, and the assisted reproductive communities to all come together for a couple of days of healing and speakers, and we will even have laughter. I think there's going to be a donor-conceived comic there as well, and music from Corey Goodrich, our fellow NPE, and fellowship. So I'm really excited for it. I will be speaking there along with other podcasters. I will be speaking there on, I believe, Saturday, April 1st in the morning. But the conference does start Friday, March 31st, and you can go to the website or Google Untangling Our Roots, or perhaps you will find them on Facebook as well for more information. And today we are listening to an NPE share her story. Today I am speaking with Beth. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Lily. Thanks for giving me the chance to come on.
Absolutely. I appreciate this so much. And I know you've probably been listening for about a year. Is that when we got in touch, maybe last year?
Yeah, it's been a little over a year since I found out.
Oh, and so you contacted right when you had found out.
Yeah. Well, probably a month after. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, thank you so much for doing this today. I'm going to pass it over to you. And if you can, wherever you want to start, maybe you start with your family of origin. Let us know who was in that, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Thanks. I grew up on the East Coast. I have one younger brother and one younger sister. I grew up in a pretty average 1970s family. My dad was a teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I say it was pretty average. The only thing that kind of stands out to me now is that there was a lot of drinking that happened. My dad was the part of a staff of teachers. They had a lot of parties, and they were at our house, and that is kind of a significant part of my story. When I was 12, my parents divorced. My dad remarried 3 months later, and I from then on, didn't really have much of a relationship with him. As I said, he remarried, and his new wife tried, but she didn't have kids, and she was up against 3 angry preteens. So she didn't really have much of a chance with us. But anyway, we didn't see him very often. We had weekends with him, and sometimes we'd have dinner. But again, it wasn't much of a relationship. I always say, he never, ever said one bad word about my mom, which I, later in life really grew to respect him for that. She was not, on the other hand, as kind. As an adult, I get it, but she really kind of formed how we, myself and my siblings, sort of viewed him growing up after that. His drinking continued. When I was in college and when I was a young adult, I had to set the boundary of, don't call me anymore if it's after noon. I'm not going to answer the phone. And this was kind of like what my relationship with my dad was for many, many years. He came to our family events, but he respected our wishes and didn't drink around us. It was very much of a surface relationship. 8 years ago, he had a stroke. He was 70. He had a stroke, and that kind of changed everything. So from that moment on, he had no alcohol, no cigarettes, no, not even coffee. He's very proud of himself for that. And it changed him. He lived with me for 8 months. And this was the first time I had lived with my dad since I was 12. And it was the first time I had lived with my dad sober, ever known my dad sober. So it was kind of like I had the dad that I always wished for. Like this amazing, gentle, kind, and loving man kind of came out. And we still, my brother and sister and I say, where has this guy been all our lives, right? So that's kind of the background. I have a very close family, which I'm very grateful for. And I've always been very interested in genealogy. When I was getting my master's degree in college, part of a class that I took, I had to do genealogy and research my family. And I found all the way back to the first three people on my dad's side that came to the country. And it was just, it's always been kind of a fascination of mine. So when the 23andMe started coming out and everyone was hearing about these, I kept saying, oh, I really want to do this. I really want to do this. It was just so, interesting to me. And I have two children who are young adults, and they have both done it. And I obviously looked at it, but didn't really see anything amiss. So we just all were very fascinated with that. A little over a year ago, I guess it was in December of 2021, I was at my mom's. And I had talked about wanting to do 23andMe here and there and whatever. Everybody kind of knew that I was interested in it. And I must have mentioned it again. And as I was leaving her house, and, at the time she was 76, sometimes she says stuff and you just kind of, whatever, you don't pay attention or you just don't, I don't know. And she said to me, when I was pregnant with you, I prayed and prayed that you would look like me. And I was so relieved when you did. And I don't know why. I just said, whatever I said to her. And then I left and I got in my car and I sat down and I said, wait a minute. What? I probably said some different words than that. Like, what the? But anyway, I was like, what does that mean? So I'm literally sitting in my mom's driveway and I called my sister and I told her this and she was like, oh my God. She was like, all right, I guess we need to buy some tests. So she ordered the tests. We didn't tell anybody else in the family. I just thought that, this is just another thing probably that, mom said and whatever. We didn't talk to anyone about it. We just ordered the tests and we got them and she did hers first. And for some reason, I just put mine off for a couple of days. I don't know. I just was procrastinating about it. So from the time my mom said this weird thing to when we got the test results back, I had about 4 weeks to kind of let this simmer, which in a way, I think it was obviously excruciating waiting, but at the same time, I had all this time. And during that time, I would just, every once in a while, I would look at my husband and I would go, my dad might not be my dad. So I think me continuing to say that, even though he was convinced, honey, you look like your dad. There's no way, that this is just, you're going to be surprised. It's not okay. And I heard, listening to all the podcasts, I hear people say all the time, I always knew something was off. I knew, I always wondered what was different about me. I don't look like anyone. That was not my experience at all. My younger brother and sister are very close in age. So there was that. I think that was the reason why I felt so different than them. Everyone thought they were twins, but I really did look very much like my mother. So there was never in a million years a question of this. So my sister gets her test back first because she sent it in first. And she called me. She said, guess what? Your kids are showing up on my tree. And she was all happy, thinking that was the end of it. And I said, well, let's think about this for a minute. My kids are going to show up on your tree. But, what doesn't, of course, neither of us knew anything about this. And we hung up and she texted me back and she said, why are your kids showing up as my grand niece and great niece and great nephew? And I was like, well, I'm no expert, but it says here that you're supposed to have 25% DNA match and both of them had 12 and 13. And I said, well, sounds like half to me. So I kind of that was just another nail in the coffin for me. Like, okay, this is probably going to turn out to be true. So 2 days later, I was still in bed and I got a text from her and it just said OMG in all capital letters. And I opened up my 23andMe and there it was, her name, and it said half sister. And I think because I had had so much time to kind of think about it, I still, at this point, I still had not cried. I still was just kind of going along in this mode of let's figure this out. And then I just wanted answers. And I knew I needed to talk to my mom. I live about 2 hours away from the rest of my family, but I knew that this was something I wanted to do face to face. So this was, I think, on a Friday. And of course, that Saturday I could have gone, but there was like a big snowstorm or something. So I had to wait until Sunday. And we said to my brother, I need to come to your house on Sunday. You have to be there. I have to talk to you. It was one of those things like, I can't tell you what it is because it has to be face to face. Nothing's wrong. I'm not sick. It's nothing, but I just need to. So kind of built it up. And then we went to his house and told him. And he literally just stared at the floor for about a full minute. And we both just sat there and let him think. And then he did what everyone else does and said, well, it can't be right. There has to be a mistake. Who knows how accurate these tests are, and blah, blah, blah. And I let him say that. And I said, it's easy to want to go there, but it's right. It's right. So that same day I left there and I went to my mom's and everyone has such different reactions. All I could think this whole time was my mom has been carrying this around for 55 years. I was 55 when I found out. My mom has been carrying this around for 55 years. She was 20 years old when she was pregnant with me. I can't believe that, this kind of explains a lot maybe of some of the things that she's gone through in her life. I just had a lot of compassion for that 20-year-old woman who, was in this predicament in 1966. So, and I will say, I went over to speak to her, and one thing that I thought of, and I'm glad I did, was I recorded it with my phone. I didn't tell her, which was sneaky, I know, but I did record it mostly because, and I've never let anyone listen to it except for my husband, but mostly because I knew I wasn't going to be paying as close attention as I wanted. And I wanted to make sure I remembered everything that she said. So I would highly recommend that to people. And I've heard other people say that too. Yeah, for me, that was just helpful. It wasn't with the purpose of sharing it with anyone else, but just so that I could have it. So I went over completely prepared to forgive her and, tell her I'd have done the same thing because I really believe that. And I didn't blame her. And I had listened to a bunch of the podcasts, so I knew that there were lots of different reactions that people have when they're confronted with this kind of information. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. But I just said to her, I love you very much. I have something to talk to you about. I love you no matter what. And she was just looking at me going, okay. And I said, we did this test and we're half sisters. And she just put her head down and went, oh. And so I was like, okay, well, she's not going to lie to me. I said, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but, she told me his name. I'll call him Paul. We looked him up. He had passed away in 2019, which I have very mixed feelings about. In some ways that makes it much easier for me. In some ways, obviously it doesn't. But apparently she worked with him. He was her boss as well. She worked with him and his fiance at the time. And my mom was also engaged. And, something that happened 55 years ago, she was like, I had heard, my girlfriends were telling me that your father was messing around on me up at college. And, she was trying to explain herself. And I was like, it's okay, Mom. I mean, I know everyone has different feelings. Personally, I feel like, how many people do something like this before they get married when they're young and not thinking, and there are no repercussions. Like, I don't blame her at all for what she did. She just unfortunately found herself pregnant, and she never told Paul, my biological dad. She says she never told anyone, and I tend to believe her. She actually went to his wedding, 7 months pregnant with me, which is, I'm not really sure how she kind of got up the nerve to do that, but she did. So we talked a little about it, and then she looked at me, and this, I know you'll relate, hearing lots and lots of, I think it's just generational, these women from this age. And she said, well, now that you know, I hope you can just let it go. And I just went, Mom, it doesn't work like that. Now that I know, I get to be the one that makes the decisions. And she has been she doesn't like it. I know she doesn't like it, but she also knows she can't really say anything about it. Like, it's out. She didn't want me to tell my brother and sister. I said, it's too late. She didn't want me to contact, Paul's family. I said, I'm doing that. I'm sorry that you're going to be embarrassed. I'm sorry. This is something that happened a long time ago, but I have to do this. And she's been very, she kind of like let it go, and she knows that she doesn't really have anything to say. I will say, though, and one of the reasons why I'm keeping this semi anonymous is because I will not tell my father. I know that everybody has different, I've talked to lots of people or not talked to, but seen lots of people on the forums and heard stories who choose differently. I feel this is very, very personal, but personally, this would kill my father. And, going back to, I finally got him 8 years ago as, the dad that I always was waiting for. And then it just felt like such a cruel joke, like this cruel, cruel thing. So it just makes it even so much more bittersweet when I'm around him. I had to take him to the hospital the other day for a brief procedure, and every person that said, "Are you his daughter?" It just, yeah. So anyway, it would kill him. And I have just made the decision. I've thought about it. I really felt like I had to be fair and think it through. Like, should I tell him? But every time I can't come up with a reason to. So that's where we are with that. So since finding out, one of the first things I did was tell everyone, because first of all, I live two hours away from my hometown and my family, but that's just how I am. That was what I wanted to do. I was telling everyone, all the people around me in my life here, people at the grocery store, because that was safe. If I struck up a small conversation and there was any opportunity for me to say, oh yeah, well, you want to hear this? Listen to what happened to me. I remember being actually my husband is a musician. We were at a bar where he was playing, and I was talking to these girls that I didn't know from anywhere. And so I told them, because I just thought, I need to tell somebody. That's just how I process. I think I tell people over and over again. So I turned off my results on 23andMe because obviously there's this other family, and I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag before I figured out anything. I, again, have listened to the stories, and I know some people jump right in and some people think about it. I was the kind of person that I was just really afraid. I didn't know what to do with this information. As soon as I had a name, I did all the stalking, all the social media, looking up obituaries, trying to piece things together. I had names of family, and, I have a half brother who had done some stuff on Ancestry, so I could see a little bit of that. But I was really, really unsure of how to proceed. I have two half brothers. One of them passed away very sadly in 2017. But the other one, who I'll call Rob, is very much alive. But I just kept thinking, like, this is devastating to me. I don't know if this guy is going to even want to know anything about me. I've heard enough of the stories on the podcast. Some people are very well received and some people are not. And it was so devastating to my family. I couldn't imagine doing that to another family. But I also wanted health information. My dad that I grew up with has had some pretty significant health issues, and I had to go and change all my medical records. So in my Googling, I looked up, Paul had two brothers who are both still living. I chose an uncle who I'll call Gary, who's 80. Actually, now I guess he's probably 81. And he's still working. And I found the website for where he works, and I saw his picture, and he looked like a really nice man. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to call him, because I just didn't feel comfortable calling the half brother Rob and just, throwing all this up at him. So I very nervously on a Sunday called his work number, not really knowing what to expect. And he actually answered the phone, at which I found out later it was in his office. We were still under some COVID restrictions, so he wasn't in his office very often, but he was there on a Sunday, and the phone rang, and he said, normally I wouldn't have answered it, but I went ahead and answered it. So, it, you know, it was kind of a laughable call, though, because you know how nervous you are when you do this. And my phone kept dropping. I have not great reception. And I thought, this guy is going to think I'm whack. I felt so silly. But we finally kind of he got the gist of what I was saying. He was very kind, but he was very guarded, which I understand. He wouldn't give me much information. And he said, let me think on this and I'll get back to you. So we communicated mostly through email, and gosh, waiting was just so excruciating. And he took his good old time. But when he got back to me, he wanted to do a private DNA test. And I said, that's fine. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll pay for it, because he lives in another state very far away. He said he found a place where we could both go in our area. And he said, I'll pay for it. If it turns out you're my niece, it's fine. If you're not, I'm going to ask you for half of it. I said, that's fair. That's fine. So, we went, we made this appointment. So more waiting. We made this appointment. We went. I had to take my mom with me because it was that kind of a specific test. And we had this done, and the results got messed up somehow. So we had to actually do it all over again. I mean, everyone listening, how this waiting is just horrible. And I had to wait even longer. So I finally, about mid-April, I got an email from him, and it was titled, "Welcome to the Family," which made me feel really good, because he was so guarded, and I just wasn't really sure how and I still, at this point, we hadn't really talked about what was going to happen once he found out I was related to him, and I didn't know if he wanted to tell my half brother Rob, and it was really he held all the cards. But I, had all this time, and I thought, if he doesn't want me to contact my half brother, I know that Paul, my bio dad, has a widow. It was his second wife, so not Rob's mom, but had a second wife who's still living. And I thought, if he doesn't want to give me any information, I'm willing to call her. So I kind of had a backup plan. But when we talked finally, my uncle Gary, he said, he did want to tell Rob, but he wanted to be the one to tell him. He wanted to be the one to tell everyone in the family, which I was like, okay, that's fine. So he took his time doing that, which was fine. But finally, he did talk to Rob, and Rob said that he wanted to meet me, which I was very grateful, and then also scared and not really sure how that was going to pan out. But he lives across the country from me. I'm hoping to see him this summer. We've spoken several times on the phone. We've done a couple of FaceTime calls. And the first time he talked to me on the phone, he said, "Hey, sis," which, and everybody knows, just having that little bit of acceptance, it made me feel really, really good. And he refers to like our dad, which is really weird, because having a dad who is alive, who I love dearly, I feel like I'm betraying him a little bit, but which is why I said in the beginning, there is some blessing to the fact that he's not alive anymore, because I think that would make it even more emotionally hard for me. But the best part, when I first found these people and I was stalking them, I was saying, I was looking, just, does anybody look like me? Does anybody look like me? And I couldn't really see anything in anybody that I felt looked like me. But then there was a place where, I mean, I'm showing this to you, but I had a kindergarten picture up on my Facebook as my profile picture because of all the stuff that had happened. I was honoring my little girl self, and my Rob's wife sent me a picture of their son at the same age, and it's uncanny. And that made me cry. That made me, I've never looked like anyone besides my mom. I do look very much like my mom, but I've never looked that much like anyone else. So that was really just made me feel really good. So sort of since then, it's just kind of, there's this time when everything happens and it's so exciting, but it's just kind of now everyone's just kind of accepted it. I don't speak a whole lot to Gary. He and not it. I just think, these people have this established family and they're not a very close family. I do know that. So at least I don't feel like they're all talking to each other and not me. I don't think they talk to each other very much. So, but I did get to go meet Paul's second wife. I'll call her Amy. She lives only a few hours from me. And when she found out about me, she was very excited because he died only a few years ago. And of course, she's still grieving him. And she was married to him for 25 years. So I actually went to visit her, which was really, really emotional. And I had said to her, I would really like something of his. It doesn't have to be anything valuable or anything. I just want something of his. And she gave me his wallet, which I felt was perfect because, a man carries his wallet with him every day of his life, so it's on a place in my room where I look at it every day. And she actually gave me his jacket to put on. And that I just sobbed wearing that. But that's pretty much, I think, as close as I'm going to get. I think Amy has been really open to continuing a relationship with me. And so is Rob, but he's younger than I am and he has a younger family and he's very busy. He's got a very busy job. And I've told him it's okay. As long as, I'm here and we know, we have each other. I'm okay with that. I understand. So there's been sort of minimal communication and contact, but that's okay. I'm very close to my original family. I don't even like calling them that. And they have been so accepting and understanding of this whole situation. It's brought my siblings and I much closer. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm just kind of in this place. I think I said I'm hoping to go and meet my half sibling this summer. My children know about this, and I did turn off all of my Ancestry. I ended up doing Ancestry also, but I turned off Ancestry and 23andMe, so I don't show up there. I don't know, just for now. But I told my children, it's okay. You leave yours on, and someday you may connect with people that you don't know, but this is why. So I hope that wasn't too rambling.
No. Oh, thank you so much, Beth. And I know that we'll keep your privacy, we'll respect your privacy. But you said that you would be interested in letting people reach out to you through contacting the show, and I could forward any questions or supportive comments your way. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has anything for Beth, they can email npestories@gmail.com. And thank you so much for sharing your story today. It was absolutely wonderful to listen to you.
Thank you, Lily.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.